Just hold on, they told me. Something major is about to happen. My name is Jordan Ellis. I'm 30. I live by myself in a small town right outside Portland, in a house I refurbished myself. I run a modest interior design company. Nothing flashy, but dependable and peaceful, a reflection of most of my days. My family hardly uses my name anymore. When they mention me, if I'm mentioned at all, it's usually just the sister or her. Sometimes I'm left wondering whether I slowly disappeared or if they intentionally softened my presence. So, when my mother called 12 days before my birthday, I figured it must be an accidental call, but she was the first to speak. "Hello, sweetheart. I was just wondering, what day does your birthday fall on this year?" I replied. "May 19th. It hasn't changed." She let out a soft noise, almost like a laugh. "All right, maybe reserve the day, okay? Don't schedule anything." "There's something in the works." I asked what she meant by something. She only replied, "You'll see. It's huge." 2 days later, my older brother messaged me. "Free your schedule. You're going to enjoy what's ahead. It's overdue." My older brother doesn't typically send me texts, unless he needed advice about decorating his place or suggestions for a last-minute present for my mother. Yet this time, he wasn't requesting anything. He simply seemed to be in the loop about whatever was going on, which made me pause. My family doesn't do birthday surprises. Not for me. Not since university, if I'm being honest. After I reached 25, they stopped putting in the effort. There was the year when they all sent a group message at midnight. 2 emojis, no signature. Then there was the year they promised we'd celebrate another day, which never actually happened. Still, this felt different, as if they were genuinely coordinating something, and I truly wanted to trust them. So, I canceled my site walkthrough for that day and turned down dinner with a companion. I treated myself to a small chocolate cake with a sugary flower on top from Larkspur Bake Shop, the same bakery my father used to take me to when I was a child. I tidied up the kitchen, lit a candle, and placed 2 plates at the table, not because I expected anyone to join me, just for the possibility. I wore the pearl earrings that my grandmother had given me when I was 15, and then I sat and waited. By 1 p.m., I had refreshed my messages 5 separate times. By 3, I found myself scrolling through my older brother's social feeds to check for anything new. The candle burned lower and lower. The frosting on the sweet flower began to run, and the only question that weighed more than the silence was, did they actually remember me this year, or were they simply hoping I'd believe they did? By 3:45, the candle was melted to its midpoint. The sugar flower had slumped a bit. I moved my plate aside, telling myself I'd hold off until dinner. I left the table arranged for 2 people. I tried to convince myself that perhaps they were arranging something for later. Maybe there would be a group video chat, an unexpected delivery, or even a note that began with, "Close your eyes." Deep down, I wasn't convinced any of that would happen, but I kept a bit of hope alive regardless. I wandered through the house, adjusting pictures, neatly folding a blanket again, grabbing a sock that didn't really need putting away. I did whatever I could to make the time pass without staring straight at it. At 4:50, I glanced at my phone once more. Still no fresh messages, no missed calls, nothing from my older brother, and not a single thing from my mother. All I saw was a prompt about updating software and an email from Oakline Interiors. I considered picking up the phone to just ask outright, "Is there still something going on?" But I couldn't go through with it. I wasn't ready to sound needy, or worse, to appear so. Faced with uncertainty, I found myself sitting at the table at 6, gazing at the extra plate. I filled a wine glass, not for a toast, but because I needed something other than my phone to occupy my hands. I sampled a piece of cake, which just tasted like sugar eaten in solitude. By 7:10, I found myself opening Instagram with no intention of sharing anything, merely to browse. It seemed as though everyone else was out, dining, at the park, attending shows, grinning with balloons, or cuddling dogs sporting birthday hats. I reminded myself that social media only reveals the best moments. I told myself not to overthink, but the silence on my own device lingered. Not a single tag, message, or happy birthday. I refreshed our family group thread, and the most recent post was from 7 days ago, a snapshot of Dennis Pruitt's dog in a ridiculous sweater. My older brother had left a legend comment. I reacted by tapping a heart. Nobody appeared to register my presence at all. By 8 o'clock, the candle finally extinguished itself. I let it finish burning without interfering. I expected to cry, but the tears never arrived. There was no frustration or any surge of emotion, only a deep quiet. I had stopped waiting, yet I kept circling back to the question of what the big event was and why I was left out of it. At 8:20, I scrolled back to Instagram. I pretended I was just killing time, but the truth was, I was hoping for a photo, a reference, maybe just a candle emoji, or even a fuzzy group picture with me tagged afterward. What I came across was something different. A story had been uploaded only a few minutes earlier. It was Clara Benton's profile. I clicked on it. The story began with string lights swaying above a wooden porch, then gradually shifted to a long dinner table. There were both of my parents, my older brother Brandon, our Aunt Shirley, even Uncle Martin, who lived 3 states away. Every face was beaming, glasses lifted in a toast, napkins neatly in everyone's laps. The birchwood retreat glowed in the background. The one we had stopped returning to because it was considered too distant or needed renovations. The one I consistently volunteered to repair. The one they insisted nobody visited anymore. Suspended above the table in uneven golden lettering was a banner. Brandon and Clara forever starts now. The message promised a night to remember. Engaged again. Family above all. I paused and read it once more. Engaged again. They were throwing a celebration for a second engagement. Not even the initial one. Just an event. A do-over. And somehow, that had taken the place of my birthday. It hadn't slipped their minds. It was a deliberate decision. That's when I noticed Clara. She wore pale pink, grinning and joking, her head tipped just enough to show the pendant, the locket. The light caught it briefly, unmistakable. An oval polished smooth on the sides, with tiny leaves engraved around the edge. My grandmother's, the one she put on for every holiday, every graduation. Once, when I was 11, my mother allowed me to hold it beside her bed and softly said, "This will be yours, sweetheart, when you're grown up, when the moment comes for you." After she died, I brought it up one time. My mother told me she was safeguarding it. That was the last I heard until now. My fiancé wore it without a second thought, treating it like a simple ornament. There was no pause, no significance attached. I tapped to the next story. My mother was embracing my fiancé, dabbing at her tears. The caption read, "Welcomed a daughter tonight." A heavy stillness hit my stomach. It wasn't as if I'd been forgotten on the guest list. It was that my place was gone. And they didn't even feel regret. They felt pride. Proud enough to show everyone. Proud enough not to conceal a thing. It wasn't just a careless omission. It was an intentional, thoughtful substitution, complete with a celebratory toast. And maybe the hardest thing to accept wasn't what they kept from me. It was how freely they handed it over. I was 11 the last time I touched the locket. My grandmother had carefully removed it, her hands moving as though she sensed that time itself was growing short. We sat together on her screened-in porch, a plate of orange wedges resting between us. The summer breeze hung heavy and sugary in the air. She turned her gaze toward me. She truly saw me, not looking through or beyond, but meeting my eyes. "You've got gentle eyes," she told me, just like my mother Eileen had when she was a child. Then she reached for the chain, unclasped it, and quietly placed it into my hand. "This belongs to you," she murmured, "when you're older, when the moment's right." Inside the locket was a photograph of my grandmother and grandfather, Ruth and Frederick Ellis, on their wedding day, both of them smiling as if they'd pulled off a little heist. The opposite side held a small misshapen paper heart, folded up. My name was written on it in pale blue letters, Jordan Ellis. I can still recall asking, "Should I hang on to it now?" She gave a small smile. "No, but you'll sense when it truly belongs with you," she replied. After she died, I waited several months before bringing it up to my mother. She brushed me off. "Oh, that old piece. I think I put it away along with my mother's scarves. I'll look for it later." My mother never followed through, and I never brought it up again. I convinced myself the locket didn't really matter. It was just an object. I still had the memory, and that should have been enough. But over the years, I ended up lying to myself more than once. I told myself that my mother hadn't left me out of her will, that maybe there was some mistake with the attorney. I thought perhaps my mother was just too lost in mourning, that she intended to return it one day, that I'd get it back when the moment was right. That day never came. Now, watching it hanging easily from Clara Benton's neck, as though it was nothing, I looked at my expensive dress, and a realization struck me. It wasn't that they had forgotten who I was. They saw me and made the choice that I was unimportant. The locket represented more than just a piece of metal. It stood as evidence that someone, at one point, had seen me and thought, "You are what matters most." Now that piece of evidence had been given to someone who wasn't even present when the promise was made. That night I stayed silent. I didn't speak to my mother, didn't say a word to my older brother, nor did I talk to my fiancé. There was simply nothing left to say, at least, nothing that wouldn't feel insignificant compared to what they had already done. So, I set my phone down face first and pulled the curtains closed. When the following morning arrived, I felt completely drained. It wasn't sadness or anger anymore, just a sense that I was finished. I went into the family group chat and browsed through months filled with shared links, pictures of my relative Dennis's dog, birthday emojis for my older brother Brandon, and casserole recipes from my Aunt Shirley. Mentions of me, or anything related to me, were almost non-existent. This wasn't an oversight. It happened over and over. I tapped leave on the group. No notification appeared. Nothing. Was I certain? I simply disappeared. Afterward, I headed over to Instagram. I removed my older brother from my following list. I also unfollowed my fiancé. I muted my mother's account as well. This wasn't done out of resentment. It was an act of self-preservation. Then I hesitated. I brought up my older brother's profile one final time. He still had his story posted. Overnight, he'd uploaded something. It was a brief video. My fiancé, in the act of blowing out birthday candles. My father could be heard clapping in the distance. Eileen Ellis appeared, raising a glass of wine as my older brother said, "To the only woman who ever made this family feel whole." I listened to that phrase 3 separate times. The only woman. So now, I was just a stand-in, a pause, a part waiting for someone new. It wasn't only my mother and my father who allowed me to drift away. My older brother was just as guilty. This is the same older brother who once spent 3 continuous days with me building a Lego bridge. The same older brother who, after his initial heartbreak, called me asking if grief was meant to resemble emptiness in my stomach. My older brother had told me to keep my schedule open, and that day ended up honoring a different person instead. There was no apology offered, no reasoning provided, simply a vanishing act. I exited the app on my phone. Later that same day, I packed away the final framed picture I still owned showing all 4 of us together. That photograph had been snapped at Birchwood Retreat back when my fiancé wasn't around, before all the quiet started. I cushioned the frame with sheets of newspaper and pushed it deep into the closet. I chose not to delete the photo, but I also didn't feel the need to display it anymore. That evening, I didn't set a candle alight. I chose not to reach for my phone. Instead, I observed evening fall through the glass and allowed the room to remain undisturbed. It wasn't a hush brought on by being overlooked, but the quietness of finally halting my own anticipation. And the question kept bouncing back at me, the one I hadn't dared voice until now. If this is what they choose when they say they love me, what would they do if all I wanted was nothing from them? 2 days later, I got a message. It wasn't from my mother, nor was it from my father. Instead, it was my older brother who reached out. "Hey, noticed you left the group chat. Are you all right?" I spent quite a while just looking at my phone. It felt like the kind of message someone sends when they already suspect the truth, but hope the other person will still cover it up to spare them. I chose not to answer. 6 hours later, my phone chimed again. "Listen, I see that you're upset, but can we please have a conversation?" Clara didn't intend for it to come across like that. Nor did my mother. Yet again, I offered no response. The following morning, he tried calling. I ignored the call both times it rang. He followed up with another text. "You're still my sibling, right? That has to mean something to us." A small laugh nearly escaped me. Not because anything was amusing, but because it sounded just like some line from a TV drama neither of us ever believed in anymore. By the end of 10 days, my mother emailed, "Hey honey, we missed you last weekend. Everything came together so suddenly. I hope I'm doing all right. I want to reach out soon." My birthday wasn't even mentioned. There was no apology, not even a half-hearted sorry that it slipped their minds. Just a well-crafted emptiness. Yet the subject line lingered in my thoughts. Still family. Still, as in nevertheless, as if considering me was somehow some act of virtue. Several days later, my older brother appeared at my doorstep. He hadn't called ahead. He simply stood outside with a bag of bagels from Larkspur Bake Shop, as though that would fix everything. I answered the door, but only partially. He extended the bag toward me, both blueberry and plain, just like always. I didn't accept it. He shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, I understand you're upset, but is this really something you want to make into an issue? It was only a get-together. This wasn't about you." I kept silent. He let out a sigh. "I'm getting married. Is it possible for us to avoid stirring up all this conflict now?" There it was, the request. He wasn't seeking to understand, not attempting to mend things, but merely asking for calm. What he called calm. "Can we just leave this in the past?" he said more quietly. At that moment, I regarded him not as my older brother, but as a person who had made his choice and was simply asking me not to make waves. I replied with the only response I knew he wouldn't dispute. "I'm not trying to disrupt anything, Brandon. I'm just finished pretending." He nodded as if that was enough, as if I'd agreed to keep quiet. But that wasn't true. What I actually agreed to was to stop participating. I didn't attend the bridal shower, never sent an RSVP, and ignored the invitation Clara's cousin mailed out with pastel designs and cheery fake enthusiasm. Receiving the invitation didn't surprise me. Everything remained orderly and polite, as if to show there was no lingering resentment. I let the message sit unread in my inbox until it became invalid. 10 days later, my mother reached out. This time, I answered the call. She greeted me with "sweetheart," her voice making it seem as though nothing was wrong. She told me that everyone had been missing me. I didn't respond. Brandon said, "You're still hurt. None of us wanted you to feel excluded. Things just happened quickly. You understand how these things go." I came close to saying, I understand better than you think. But I held my tongue, knowing that silence can echo more loudly when people assume I'll forgive. Then she asked, "Will you at least come to the wedding? It's very meaningful to your brother." It took me a moment to reply. As I glanced around my place, the home and life I had created on my own, I recognized something I'd never voiced before. "I used to be present," I eventually said. "You just never noticed me." The line became silent. It wasn't that the call ended, just that an emptiness settled. My mother softly cleared her throat. "That's not the case, sweetheart." But it was accurate, and my mother was fully aware of that fact. I refrained from saying anything more. I didn't hang up either. Instead, I allowed the quiet to linger between us until she eventually mumbled, "Well, just keep me updated." Then the call ended with a click. I sat there for quite some time, alone with the aftermath. There was no anger, no sadness, just a tranquil quietness. It wasn't anticipation. It was the calm of finality. There was a time I had existed in that place. The difference was that you simply never saw me. 10 days before the ceremony, I prepared the locket as a gift. I didn't use any fancy packaging, just a plain white envelope, the kind meant for official letters or notices from court. Carefully, I placed the locket inside, its warmth lingering from my skin. There was no letter or message, only the pendant. I decided to take it directly to the post office. The attendant asked if I wanted tracking, but I declined. I inscribed the address myself, by hand, Clara Benton or Brandon Ellis. After that, I sent it through the mail. No sender listed, no identifier, only the locket arriving precisely where they believed it should be. At this point, I didn't require its return. I didn't need anyone to understand. All that mattered was removing it from my home. That Thursday, one last message arrived from my older brother. "Did you send this?" I chose not to answer. There was nothing else that needed explaining. That evening, I took down the final photograph of my family that remained in the hallway. I replaced it with an item I had once framed but never displayed, a simple sketch from my college years. A charcoal drawing of a chair, positioned just off-center in an empty space. A single chair still left unfilled. I leveled its frame, took a few steps back, and observed. It served as a reminder that I, too, was present. I lingered at the table long after my place had been cleared. They would never say my name at the wedding. No one would raise a glass to me during the speeches. It's possible some people wouldn't realize the envelope had arrived, but the truth would still register. On some silent, unspoken level, they'd understand I had witnessed all of it. I held on to those moments, and I made the decision to leave that door unlatched as I left. Not as an invitation for my own return, but as a sign that I could have stayed if I wished. If I ever slipped away without a sound, letting them hear the quiet all the more sharply, I don't have to give a reason. I just leave a single dot.